I think what motivated us was that we were able to communicate with the cohort in a way that we weren't able to before, simply because we had so many students.
And OnTask can save me time, and it can add the more personal touch there as well.
I was curious about the option for having a different communication channel with students. And I was aware that while my subject was pretty small by accounting standards, that I might be involved, later on with subjects that were going to be much larger, by which having some level of automated communication could actually be quite useful. So I thought it would be a good opportunity generally to find out about something that might work both in a small scale and a large scale. And then when I went to that presentation and training that you put on, that's when it really formed up a sense that I could use OnTask as a way to nudge students to be doing this more self-directed learning out of class, with hopefully the result that it would improve their preparation and confidence in the online seminars, which would improve the learning environment and outcomes from those online seminars.
The more serious reason is going back to my concerns about belonging, which it sounds really fancy now that I say it like that. But all right, let me try to explain what I mean. I want my students to feel comfortable in the online environment, and I want them to feel like they are getting, the time from me that they deserve as a student, that one-on-one attention.
Well, I have been sending out personal emails for a few semesters now, but only at significant points. So for students who received high distinctions in assessments, and I would be manually sending those emails out to each student. And I got a bit sick of that, I suppose. And I also wanted to do it at more points in the semester, not just at those 2 assessment points. I thought I could really reach them. I also got really frustrated last semester because I got a few students telling me at the end of the semester they didn't realise that attendance was compulsory, when it's written within our subject guide and everywhere on Canvas that attendance is compulsory for tutorials. And when I heard that, I thought, well, you're clearly, there's something missing here. And so I wanted to create a system or use a system that could connect to these students earlier in the semester to make sure that they were aware about attendance, as well as other bits and pieces that they needed to know early on.
If I'm being honest, one of the things that motivated us to do OnTask was it was a thing that we knew about, and we like to try new things. Our subject is kind of a canary in the coal mine, I guess, of that's probably not the right analogy. Basically, we kind of first adopters for any new thing to see if it'll help. And we knew that we had a number of students who weren't completing tasks or weren't completing pre-work, and OnTask seemed like something that could help us with that, and it did.
The effect on students' learning experience, I think one of the big things at UTS at the moment is the belonging, the issue of belonging, because so many students have been isolated, right? And so the fact that they get an email that's specifically addressed to them, that's based on their situation, that's based on what they've done, I think is very important, because they feel that they matter, and they're not just one of thousands of students. That we treat them all the same.
From the student feedback which we have received throughout the semester, not only in communication on Teams, but also in the mid-session survey or in reply emails, that students, they have clearly mentioned that they have felt connected to the subject more as compared to other subjects, and they are more motivated to work more hard after, getting an email from the instructor or teacher that how they are progressing with the subject. And that has motivated them either to work too hard or just continue working hard as they are already doing. So it feels like if they have felt that we cared for them more.
I think the biggest impact was particularly after the first quiz result. The prompts that getting the OnTask emails, the students actually sent me emails back. And from that, we developed these very individualized kind of dialogues around how they were going in the subject, how they'd gone in the assessment, their strategy, and how they're feeling, and how they were going to, what things that they might do. And that was perhaps the most unexpected benefit and effect of using OnTask.
What I noticed was after I'd send out the email, there'd be a spike in participation on that discussion board. So the students would go back and quickly fill in Module 2's discussion board as if to say, oh, I've done it now, Keith.
I don't know if it has much impact on their learning experience. I think it has impact on building connections and I suppose humanizing the whole online experience, because I think most students thought that it was a pretty tailored email, like a personal email.
I think so. Anecdotally, without going, I haven't really gone through to double check this, but I do feel like we've gotten better grades on communication. So the student, I think the students find that those personalized emails make them feel more connected to us as coordinators and thus more communicated with. So I think we tend to get better scores for that sort of thing because we reached out to them. They got this. They realized they had to do this task because we were communicating with them. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
For the most part, with the pre-work ones, where we just see a spike in completions, that didn't see too many emails come back to us, but speaking with students, they appreciated the reminder. There was a very small number of students who were like, I don't want to receive these emails, like 1 or 2 out of 700 let us know that they didn't want it. But the majority of anyone else that we communicated with about it, which obviously wasn't every student, the majority of those were like, did say that they appreciate the reminder because, there's so much to do in all of their subjects. That things like that tend to get forgotten. If they just got that reminder the day before class, oh yeah, I need to do that, and then they do it.
I think the first thing is we want to use our time as best we can to improve students' experience, right? And from that point of view, it's a very, very efficient tool.
OnTask, to be very honest, it was not taking more of my time. Actually, I was spending the same amount of time with new analytics as well, or sending, without even using the analytics, sending emails to students and following up on them for early interventions.
I wouldn't say that it saved me time in this first instance, because I was doing a lot of learning and trialing and playing with it. And it would take me time to write the email and to, like I say, plan those conditions and so on. So it probably, I wouldn't say it saved me time.
The short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is not at the start. So it added another layer of design to my course in that I had to think about how I was going to use it and actually plan for it, and coming up with that template of this is when I'm going to send the messages. I like having plans and all those kinds of things in place. And as I got more familiar with that, I got quicker at doing that kind of thing. But in the teaching session, it absolutely saved me time. And I think it did more than that. You know, it also made it more effective. You know, because it was personalised. You know, so having OnTask set up and ready to go, and knowing, you know, what my schedules were and my deadlines, and knowing how, once I became familiar with the interface, yeah, it took over those kinds of weekly update emails, because I incorporated all of that into the OnTask functionality.
I don't think it saved me time. Oh, I suppose it did in terms of not having to manually email some students, but then I created more of these than I would have in the past, more of these emails. So I think that they are time consuming to write, but then once you have them there, I'll be able to use them again going into the future. So for the first time, I think it is time consuming to set up, time consuming, where the time comes in is obtaining the data and cleaning the data and understanding what data will be useful for sending these out. And also because the systems don't talk to each other. And where I really wanted the data, which I can't get, well, I can next year, but I couldn't this year, is attendance data for tutorials. And that's what I really wanted to use this program for. It was it was to check attendance, to remind students to attend, because it's really important for their learning. And because I couldn't get attendance data, I had to manually still write to each individual in semester. So after week 4, I wrote to each, well, only the students that tutors would alert me to that were falling behind on attendance. But yeah, I still had a huge number of students who failed because they didn't attend the required number of tutorials. And so next semester, we'll be able to use the integrated attendance feature in Canvas. And then I can just download that data, and I'll work early enough to write a good attendance email for, although I have one that I've been using just manually, so I'll just turn that into a OnTask email.
I don't think it saved me time. I think what it did was it made a task that I wouldn't have done otherwise easier, and thus it got done. So
can you explain a little bit more about that?
I wouldn't have reached out to every student who hadn't done the pre-work in a 700 student cohort manually. Like, no way in hell would I have done that. If I was doing that, OnTask would have saved me time, but I wasn't doing it. I didn't do it until we used OnTask, so it enabled us to do that in a reasonably efficient way, and thus we did it. But it certainly isn't. There's no task in OnTask that I would have done otherwise, because it's just too hard to do. So technically, it's costing me time, but in a efficient way to do a thing that I wanted to do, I just wasn't able to previously.
In terms of the efficiency, put in the information, sends it out, it's done. You don't have to muck around with a mail merge, sending an email out one by one, which when you've got 1,500 students, it's going to take a little bit of time to work through in Outlook. So yes, I think it has saved time to achieve the outcomes that we wanted.
Okay, that's important. Yeah, so that's the plus of it. Well, what were the main challenges you faced when using OnTask in your subject?
Yeah, the main challenges, I think, are that, as you know, when we first started using it, we had a whole lot of technical issues, and it really wouldn't work for the large group of students we had. But that was before your time, and that was all resolved. So from the current perspective, the challenges are obviously, how much information to put in those emails. That's a challenge. The student cohort and the way they learn always changes. And so it's another challenge, having to adapt those messages over time, work out what to put in them.
The challenges, they are not unique in a way that, you know, that's only with OnTask and it's not with a new tool we learn. So it was the same amount of thing, you know, attending the workshop and then practicing, you know, with some data, you know, before sending the messages and things. So it was the same, but yeah, it was, your support was there. So it was, the process became quite easy. But I'm sure the first time it will be difficult for anyone, you know, to try that and to make sure that they are doing the right way. So I had the same fear or challenge, you know, as well, that getting a confirmation that students, they are getting the messages correctly.
So this was a challenge in terms of not becoming too repetitive.
So the
and
messaging,
particularly,
right?
repetitive, because I'm in one sense that, like, I just wanted them to like look at the preparatory material, you know, and at some point, the ones that have like their behaviors are set, and I'm just repeating again. You know, and after quiz 1 and after quiz 2, it's like, okay, you got this, and you know. That was something that I'm looking to develop next time, is to improve, you know, to plan out again, you know, so that I'm not repeating.
Probably the area of the greatest learning was in the actual design, the message design that I wanted to send out to the students. So my first iteration and the very first time in Crunch was really, really brief. I think there was a salutation to the students and a little summary, and then there was a paragraph about their participation on the discussion, and then I said, you know, see you next week, stuff like that. And I actually got to the point in later versions where I realized I could actually do a lot more than that. And so, and not just a lot more, I could do it a lot more efficiently, you know. So in the second version of Crunch, I started playing around with embedding links to Canvas pages in my messages. You know, so instead of saying, "Hey, I noticed that you didn't comment on Module 3's discussion," and then it's up to the student. They've got to log into Canvas, and then they've got to find Module 3, and then they've got to read it. And you know, why not just make it a hyperlink so it takes them straight there? Now that seems really obvious, and it's a little bit of extra work for me. But I think, and I haven't measured it yet, but I think it would lead to more participation, you know. So it's that old, you know, don't make me think kind of approach, you know, don't make me think about stuff I don't have to think, just make it easy for me to follow the link and go there and make a comment.
I guess I would say it changed what I think is possible. So previously, like before OnTask, if you had have asked, can you send personalized feedback to 700 students as the subject coordinator, I would have said no. But now with like using a tool like that, it becomes reasonably trivial, provided you have something to say and you have the data to figure out whether you should say it. So I think it's changed what I think is possible around the giving feedback at scale.
Provided they're happy to sit down, put the effort in to set this up and think through this at the start of the session, because there is work in that. There's work in understanding where to get the information, the analytics, the data you need to set it up. But if you put the investment in at the start, you can have a big impact on the feedback you provide students. It wasn't possible before.
So you're saying that you actually did spend quite a bit of time like planning for the feedback?
Yeah, so when we, when we used it every single week before we started using Teams and all that kind of stuff in 2020, we planned out what email we wanted to send each week, what was going to be in it based on what we're covering. So some of them was, some parts of the email were general subject reminders, others were specific based on what they had done in terms of the quizzes.
Okay, so you did sort of like have some kind of organization of the feedback before you started?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Was evidence of students' performances there. So initially, the mail out schedule we planned, we ended up like the plan was to send them 9 or 10 emails, but we ended up in sending only half of the emails. So the reason is very positive behind that actually. It is not because we were not able to send more emails. The reason is that students didn't give us the opportunity to send them emails. So with the assessment task, I should mention that here that 12 students, they did not submit on time. So 7 of them, I had no clue about them that why they haven't submitted. 5 had the special considerations approved, which I knew of. So when we send them a message that, you have a missing assessment task, you still have 5 days to submit. So they submitted within those 5 days. And with the next 2 assessment tasks in that subject, there was no missing submissions. So that was something very helpful. And I guess, and students, they knew that they have the, someone is checking on them. So they want to prove themselves that we should not get late this time,
In terms of my time using OnTask, this semester, I really saw it as an investment. I was investing time in it. So I was making time to, to pull different data, to think about how I might cut it, to trial different, to draft the email and look it back and, play around with it. So I was actually I was willing to invest the time to get a sense of how it worked. With the view that, in the long term, this will mean that, at some point I imagine it could save me time, but I'm not looking at the tool as a time saver, but it is a different way that I can be engaging with the students that I think is really valuable. Yeah.
And I think the part that has got me excited about OnTask is that it's answered one of those questions that I had right at the start of setting up this course. So when I talked about having only 6 weeks and the challenges of providing formative feedback in those 6 weeks, and the way that I'd done it in the past was I'd encouraged, like I said, I'd encourage students to send me their ideas and I'd give individual feedback on each one. But the version of OnTask that we used in Think, where I did the video-based feedback based on their own understanding of their mastery, I think it's not there yet, but I think that offers some real potential to provide meaningful formative feedback on a week-on-week basis. And I like the fact that it is in some ways student-led. They're the ones making their assessments about their mastery, and then I'm responding to those kinds of things.
No, I think it's been a useful experience using OnTask and getting to know how it could work. I think it's brought me closer to the student cohort.
We're just going, did you complete the thing or not? It's a much simpler process. So I certainly didn't find it too challenging to do that process of what do you say to someone who has done the thing and what do you say to someone who hasn't done the thing. Certainly the one, someone who has done the thing, I guess there is a bit of a challenge there of is it worth saying anything to them and what do you say? But it wasn't particularly hard. It's just this as a congratulations for doing the thing. This is what you did and this is where you'll use it. It's a pretty simple process because of the binary nature of it. Yeah, I'm not sure that honestly it's just around I think we've struggled more with getting the data into OnTask than we have anything else.